Okay, it is 6:01. We have about 14
I'd like to
people.
welcome you to the, well, let's go ahead and get the welcome done. I'm Leonette Slay, the president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Birmingham. And I'd like to welcome you to this last regular meeting of our year and tell you that our next meeting will be May the 24th from 6:30 to 8. And that will be our annual meeting at which we will elect our new leadership team. We will adopt a budget for the coming year, and we will review our bylaws for the first time since 2017 with some very specific changes recommended. Birmingham members will be getting all the documentation by the end of this month. Per our bylaws, you have 30 days to review the documents prior to their May 24th meeting. May 22nd is our state convention. You are welcome to come, and that's a virtual Zoom meeting, only 4 hours with a lunch break, and you can get full details at the LWVAL.org website. And a little teaser here, we're going to have an outing with an Audubon staffer, either Saturday, May the 1st or Saturday, May 15th. And she is going to give us wonderful insights into some of the natural areas and the birding of this part of Alabama. Mask will be required and more details to follow. But this is a little something to get you ready for the summer months and to underscore the League's interest in environmental matters. So having said that, I'm going to turn our meeting over to Vice President Dana Ellis, who will introduce our esteemed guest speakers tonight. Thank you, Dana.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you. I'm excited about tonight's presentation. We're a little bit over halfway in our Alabama legislative session, and we're pleased to have the co-chairs of the League of Women Voters of Alabama's advocacy teams. I do want to tell you a little bit about both of them, and then I'm going to turn it over to them. Dr. Robin Buckaloo is a retired governmental engineer. Since retirement, she's been active with Habitat for Humanity and has served on the College of Engineering Leadership Board at UA. She's been active with the League since 2017 and currently serves, as I mentioned already, as co-chair of the advocacy team. Kathy Jones is also an engineer and a project manager. She retired from Marshall Space Flight Center after 33 years there. She organized the League of Women Voters of the Tennessee Valley, serving as its president for the first several years. At the state League of Women Voters level, she serves as secretary for the State League. She's the lead of the Voting Rights Restoration team and the co-chair of the advocacy team. So we have two very accomplished folks tonight, and I will turn it over to them and put myself on mute. I will try to monitor the chat. We usually hold questions till the end. Thanks, everybody. Kathy or Robin?
I will kick it off, and I'd like to just go ahead and share my charts. Just one moment, I'm going to do that and then get started. All right. So thank you for the introduction, Dana. And my name is Kathy Jones, and this will share eventually. Let's see. There we go. So this time last year, we proposed to establish a new advocacy team, and the state board authorized it. And then over the last year, we created, let's see, it's starting to share, I guess. No, hold on, I'm going to do it again. All right, are you, okay, there you go. All right, so last year, this time, we got approval to start the creation of an advocacy team. This team was an idea of a way to to bring together the state board with the local leagues to try to accomplish change that we all were wanting to see in Alabama, and it really gave us a chance to work together. And so this year with the legislative session, 2021 legislative session has been our kickoff, basically, with a team of outstanding individuals from all the local leagues, almost all of them. We've got one or two that we're still working with to get the member identified. But today we'll give you a status on where we're at, and then just sort of more of a information about how we're organized and what our focus areas are. And so I'm gonna advance to the next chart. It'll go, let's see, there we go. All right, so the mission statement for the league is empowering voters and defending democracy. And our primary focus for the League of Women Voters is voting rights and elections. And you can see those topics are at the heart and soul of what the League of Women Voters is about. And that's really where the focus for the advocacy team is, under voting rights and elections. And then we've added into the mix some of the things that are foundational. And we'll talk about like transparency in government. And we'll talk more about those in a minute. So what is advocacy? Advocacy, if you look up, there's several definitions that you can find, but two of them that I felt like expresses what we're doing the best is meaning giving a person support to have their voices heard. And it's a service which is aimed at helping people understand their rights and then also helping them to be able to express their views. And it's an activity by which an individual or a group is seeking to influence decisions within the political, economic, or social institutions that affect them. The guiding principle for the League is that we believe that a democratic government depends upon the informed and active participation of its citizens. And we feel like it's one of our primary goals is we want the citizens of Alabama to understand the issues that affect them, and then also understand the profound effects that local, state, and federal government has on every aspect of their lives, their families, the community, and the environment. And we want them to also be able to express to demand accountability and transparency in government, and see the connection between the issues and injustice and our elected leaders, because it all basically comes back to getting out and voting on your leadership and understanding why you're voting, who you're voting for. The priorities that we have for the advocacy team were selected back in October, and the voting rights issues, there's three main topics underneath voting rights, which includes universal automatic voter registration, voting rights restoration, absentee and early. Also, we're working on Fair Maps. That's something that we're partnered with the National League on, this Fair Maps initiative. And underneath that is also the HR 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act. And then the last topic, main category, is government transparency, of which open records is one of the parts of that. And so this has been really guiding us as far as things we looked at during this legislative session, and trying to select our priorities, and also just to right now we're starting to kick off planning for the future to say, how are we going to make changes in each of these areas? All right, so advocacy is a year-round effort, and that's one of the things that's nice about having this advocacy team organized and working together. The more we work together, the more effective we'll be. We've got ongoing efforts which relate to education, developing our relationships and alliances, and then continually improving our own capabilities and competencies, and identifying priorities and coordinating with other stakeholders and legislators. It all gets back to basically developing a presence and a relationship with those around us to make the change that we want to see. And then associated with that, we've also got the publicity, the media plans. We've got to be able to be effective in our calls to action and stay engaged with what's happening. And then during the legislative session, we're going to, this year has been a fine example of of a lot of voting bills, but we can't track them all. So we narrowed our focus, but we reviewed over 50 different bills to determine which ones we were going to focus our efforts on. And then we are identifying the supporters. We're also finding out who's opposing us. And so at that point, we develop our strategies based on that. And we have to stay flexible because there's always something that's happening that we didn't expect. Getting back to more of the overall advocacy approach for the league, during a normal year, there's a lot more options available to us. During the COVID pandemic restrictions, we haven't been able to do all of these things, but some of these, like sending letters, emails, text from our constituents, making sure we have calls to action, postcard campaigns. We have been able to do written and spoken testimony to some of the committees this year. Next year, we're hoping to do a day on the Hill. That would be that's a goal of ours to basically organize around voting rights. And then we're going to be encouraging all of our league members to visit their legislators when they're at home, because they're only going to be in session for a part of the year. And even when they're in session, they're at home on Mondays and Fridays. So we really need people to talk to their legislators. And looking at the advocacy team itself, you can see how we're organized. We've got a board co-chair, which is Robin. And then the way we wanted to set it up is we have a local league co-chair that works with the board co-chair. Right now, I've been standing in that position as an interim, getting things started, but that's going to shift, and Beth McDaniel's going to take it starting in the next month or so around convention. She'll be the local league representative co-chair. And then we've got Jean has for years now, she's been our voice as trying to help us keep track of the legislation. And we'd like to establish an observer corps related to advocacy, especially watching what's happening in some of the areas like redistricting. We need someone to be able to tell us where the meetings are and what happened. And then we've got Stephen Stetson is our legislative advisor. All of our local leagues have advocacy leads that have been appointed by the boards of each local league, and they're team members as well. And then Elsa Roberts is our communications coordinator, who just this year we've come a long way in creating a strong community social media presence. We've got an Advocacy Newsletter. We've got a blog, which Catherine Davies is the blog editor for that. She's out of the Tuscaloosa League. And then Sarah Bang out of the Tennessee Valley League is the social media person that is working with Gene Johnson to get communications out on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And so you can see we've got a strong team in place. There's a lot of different interactions, and I'm sure this is just to give you an idea. This team is going to be working year round, basically getting ready for the upcoming legislative session, as well as taking advantage of educational opportunities. All right, so just wanted to point out that the session started on February 2nd. Because of some of the COVID pauses, they are slipping the end date to May 30th. Tuesday of this week was the 19th legislative day. Next Tuesday is going to be the 22nd legislative day of the 30-day session. So we're pretty far into the session for this year. I'm going to switch gears now and pass this off to talk about the bills that are our priorities, and then we'll come back with closing and talk about what you can do to help us make a difference on these bills.
Okay, so this year we have 3 state bills that we're following and coordinating with other organizations and trying to get passed. So you can see the chart. We're concerned with debt-based driver's license suspension and open records and open meetings, which goes back to the transparency topic that Kathy brought up, because we decided early on that it's foundational. If we don't know what's going on in Montgomery, then we can't pursue any of our other objectives. So if you could look at the next chart. So this is the driver's license suspension, which, you know, until I found out this was going on, I didn't realize how important it is. But there are a number of unintended consequences that end up when people's driver's license are suspended. And we're talking about non-driving related, non-moving violation offenses, mostly punitive. But in addition to what's on this chart, which I will let you read for yourself, the researchers at Appleseed have also found that driver's license suspension has a serious effect on women who are trying to leave a domestic violence situation. It causes them to be unable to leave, and it results in injury and actual death in some cases, just because a woman might have lost her driver's license because she failed to appear in court because she didn't get the notice to appear. So this is a small bill. It's doing pretty well. It has opposition in state agencies, which are being funded on the backs of the poor people that are caught in the court system. But we really think it's made a lot of progress this session. We've helped Appleseed with postcards and notes to legislators and that sort of thing. And we think that we're in a pretty good position. If it doesn't make it this year, it might make it next year. But right now it looks reasonably good, except for one member of the legislature named Pettis who keeps throwing rocks at it. Okay, so let's look at the next bill. So this is one of the foundational issues. Last legislative session, Cam Ward introduced this bill and was not able to get it out of committee before COVID shut everything down. He was pretty annoyed because the people that opposed his open records law really didn't give him any reasons why they opposed it. We as the League of Women Voters understand that we have to know what's going on. And the current situation in Alabama is ridiculous because a state agency doesn't even need to respond to a request and there's no penalty whatsoever. Okay, so next, excuse me, come back to that. So Senator Arthur Orr is sponsoring it this term, and we have got the state archives making comments on it. What is the name of that group, Kathy? The Association of County Commissions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of state and county agencies in the state don't want this law because they don't want to be bothered with making their records available to the public. If they're very small, they're afraid that it's going to cost too much money. But if you look at the bill, it's really a pretty good bill, and it does provide for reasonable reimbursement for people to provide records to the public. Okay, so let's look at the next bill. Okay, this is written in complicated legalese taken out of the bill, but basically the problem that we have with open meetings is that meetings in which state employees get information from lobbyists but don't discuss it with each other are not considered to be open meetings. Also, and we're talking about a quorum, a number of meetings a number of people in the meeting that would be able to vote on the law. So if they don't actually talk to each other, it's not an open meeting, and they can talk to the lobbyists and it's still not an open meeting. So a bill has been introduced to address these issues, and there's unfortunately a lot of opposition to it in the legislature. But we regard this as a necessary companion to the open records law. Okay, so now we're going to look at the two federal issues that we're supporting on the next chart. So we're supporting the For the People Act, which is for which we have a grant from National, and the Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2019, which will now be known as the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act in the new Congress. So next chart talks about the For the People Act, which is a huge bill that would make an enormous amount of difference in the United States. And currently, we have another grant for this year from Fair Maps, not because we can get our legislature or our senators or our Congress people, except for Terry Sewell, to support it, but because National wants us to educate the Alabama public on the issues in this bill and what it would do for them. So it has a lot of pieces to it. The one that the National is focusing on the most is the one that would require independent commissions in all states that don't currently have them, that would be nonpartisan and would do redistricting after each census independently of the state legislature. Right now, I've been following the news in Congress, and I'm seeing that somebody has floated a provision to say we won't end the filibuster, but we might end the filibuster in issues that relate to voting and voting rights. That would be a game changer. Okay, so then the next chart is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And what this bill would do, and it was originally sponsored by Terry Sewell of Alabama, is it would put pre-clearance back that was found to be unconstitutional in Shelby versus Holder in 2013. But instead of just calling out states that historically, before the Civil Rights Act of 1965, discriminated against Blacks and other people, it puts criteria in there, and it counts the number of instances of discrimination in state and local municipalities and jurisdictions. And if that hits a certain threshold, then that locality goes under pre-clearance. So it's very even-handed, and anybody could fall under pre-clearance. It also contains protections for Native American groups that were not in the original Civil Rights Bill. My understanding is that originally this H.R. 4 was folded under the For the People Act, and that it was pulled out during the last Congress because it was felt that by bundling it into the For the People Act, it was going to make For the People Act impossible to pass. So that is basically my summary of the bills that we are pushing right now. Now, originally we were pushing a bill for no excuse absentee ballots, which John Merrill had said that he was in favor of. We met with him. We met with some other groups. Kathy met with Laura Hall, who sponsored a bill in the legislature. John Merrill met with her, got her to change her bill, and then pulled out at the last minute and said he doesn't support no excuse absentee ballots. So he basically pulled the rug out from under something that we were working on. And we decided to sort of drop that and perhaps maybe address it next year if the League of Women Voters of Alabama wants to do that. So that's basically my summary of the bills that we've been pushing this legislative session. And this is a call to action for those of you that are inspired by what we're trying to do. Every call to a legislator makes a big difference. What we're hearing is that if one legislator gets 10 different communications from his constituents, that is really amazing. And it definitely gets his attention.
And we can help if anyone has questions about who or how to contact your legislator. We can help. There's also our blog, there's some articles on the newsletter and the blog for the Advocacy Newsletter that can help you with information you need to be able to talk. And these charts will be available to you if you want to use them to help you guide your discussions when you call or write a letter.
For those of you that remember the League of Women postcard campaign that we had last year, we have probably 1,000 of those postcards that are ready to be imprinted with any message that any local league would like to put on them and then send out. And we can print them up with your message.
All right, I saw a question about the Advocacy Newsletter. This next chart will, I think the Advocacy Newsletter should be coming out to all members already through MailChimp, but we need to make sure, Rose, that that's happening. This chart right here is I wanted to provide everybody with information on how to reach out, how to get the information that we've generated on advocacy. And the blog is, you can see the URL for the blog. You can also go to LWVAL.org. There's a link there. Several of our Facebook and media posts, social media posts are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we'd love for you to join us in helping us make advocacy more effective. We are taking the long view. Basically, we're doing this, we're learning as we go. We realize that this is a challenge, and we're keeping it in perspective, realizing that even though while our highest priority voting rights bills may not pass this year, we're developing relationships and we're learning lessons, and we're building in a resilience and a persistence to advocacy, which is going to make us stronger. And we're going to be in a whole lot better place to move them forward next year or the year after that. And improving voting rights in Alabama is going to be difficult and slow, and we're going to have to always pay attention and focus on getting citizens educated. It's increasing our transparency in government, and then ultimately it's all going to revolve around increasing voter turnout, because that is the key to change. And so that's the end of the presentation, and I guess we'd be happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Well, let me first ask, Rose, I tell you what, put the blog address in the chat room as well, if you don't mind, Kathy.
No, I don't mind. I will copy it here and put it there just a second.
That's great.
And I thought that Jean and Elsa are online, could answer. I thought all of our members were getting the Advocacy Newsletter.
Yeah, I send it out to the full list that Jean prepared.
Is that, I guess if everybody's not on the list, I guess we just need to compare and make sure the list is complete.
Yeah, the list comes from the membership list with the National League. And so if your local league is putting you into the national database, you should be on it. Now, you might have some issues with that you might have that address blacklisted. I don't know. We could talk about that, but you should be, if you're a member of the league, or if you have expressed interest in joining our interest list, you should be receiving these calls to action and the legislative newsletter. The advocacy newsletter. Let me know if you're not. We'll check into it.
Yeah, I'm glad. I appreciate Rose asking.
Okay.
So look, monitoring the chat box. Cindy, do you want to tell the group about the Alabama Rivers Alliance legislative training?
Sure, thank you for offering that. So our Alabama Water Rally conference is this weekend. It starts tomorrow at 12:30 and it's all on Zoom through Sunday. And it's I can put our website in the chat if you want. And one of the sessions is going to be on legislative advocacy with Conservation Alabama, which is our League of Conservation voter affiliate here in Alabama. But we're going to offer, the main purpose of the session is to kind of just, it's only an hour and a half, so there's not a lot you can do. It's just to kind of inspire folks to really not be cynical about the legislature and to get more involved. And just like you guys are saying, to really meet your legislators outside of the session, build those relationships on an ongoing basis. So we want to provide all the different resources for people to stay more engaged and know all the different areas of legislative work. So we'll provide the league's website and information. We're going to provide, Alabama Rise and Conservation Alabama and all the other resources out there. So we'll definitely share that. The other thing I was going to ask, if I may ask a question, is it's a little more about the I can't remember the number, SB 165, I think, the Open Records Act bill. We've been kind of sharing advocacy and action alerts around that. That's very important to our environmental work as well at the Rivers Alliance. And since it seems like local governments are kind of a little bit of an obstacle, do you think that it benefits us to talk to our local governments, or should we just be talking to our legislators at this point and trying to get them?
I think it definitely can't hurt to talk to your local governments.
Okay.
Cindy, I was going to point out, one of the things we got in a recommendation was to also talk to our county commissions and the school boards, because when we had the open records open hearing the other day, those were the two groups that came and spoke in opposition. And I did go back and find both of those organizations on the internet with their district maps, and but basically they divided those lobbying groups up into districts which have counties. Like on the county commission lobby group, they've got Limestone County and Madison County combined into one district. Jefferson County is its own district, and then across Alabama they've divided it into districts. But I think if we could get the local county commissions and the school boards to basically go back to their lobbyists and say, we want open records, or at least to tell us what they don't like. Wasn't a lot. They didn't really have anything substantial as far as telling us what they didn't like.
Okay,
Kathy,
that was my next question, was are there specific things that they are worried about that we should try to address? So I hear you, they're just kind of generally against it.
Well, I think there's something behind that. And when I started looking at I think if we can call them and ask them, and I did call the lobbyists this week just to try to start the conversation, and they said, well, we'll get back with you. And I still think we ought to do that. But I think, the individual members, they ought to, they need to go talk to their leaders and tell them that they need to go tell their lobbyists that they need open records, because that's better government, more accountable and transparent is good for everybody.
Now, who's on the side of this is largely business. And Kathy, you put the Business Council of Alabama new person in touch with Appleseed.
Now that was on the driver's license one.
Right. But the point I'm making is that the guy that introduced this bill, Pringle, is a construction guy. He's in the construction business. It's very upsetting to business owners. Wait a minute, that's the driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
The business is for open records, and especially the legal, the Bar Association is for open records, because when they need to get information out of the state, a lot of times they end up having to sue the state to get the information. And so we're looking around to see who would be on our side for open records. It's not a partisan issue. It's been introduced both times by Republican in the legislature.
And I think you're starting to see organizations at I call it micro advocacy. There's at least two groups up here in Madison County who have formed who want to hold their city governments accountable. And so this transparency open records law would help them as well. You know, there's things that are happening in the city government right now. You have no real ability to get any information out of city governments because they don't have any, there's nothing that requires them to respond to the citizens. So this, by passing this law, if you have organizations that are out there trying to push for, you know, accountability, say, you know, in Birmingham, then this would help them as well.
Kathy, what is the current law on open meetings in Alabama?
Open meetings are open records. There's
Open records.
open records. There, you know, there are laws, but there's no penalty. There's no requirement to provide it, and there's also no limit on the amount of money that they could charge a person.
And there's no time limit on responding one way or the other.
Yeah, that's.
Now, how about the Open Meetings Act in Alabama? What's
The Open Meetings Act was mainly aimed at the Public Service Commission because they do so much stuff behind closed doors. And they're elected statewide and they're supposed to be in favor of the people, but what they're really doing is getting very cozy with the utility companies, and they do it all in secret.
Yeah, and apparently this generated as a result last year where people in the Public Service Commission could vote to make a meeting closed. Anyone to record the could then they could.
Yeah, there was a woman at the, my understanding is really coming out of the lawsuit. There was a woman from that went to the Public Service Commission and wanted to record it on a cell phone, and some proceedings that were happening there, and they claimed that she couldn't, and they kicked her out of the meeting. And then the lawsuit centered on whether or not that it was actually a public meeting because they didn't deliberate. They just were listening to some testimony or something. So
That's right, because apparently, and Stephen Stetson was helping us understand some of the background on that, because it sounds like this, you know, basically is, you know, the things that are government open, if they're doing deliberations, it's like, it seems very arbitrary right now. There's no real restrictions. And so this would give them guidance on when, if they're doing deliberations, even with a lobbyist, they have to call it an open meeting.
Another question that was in the chat that you may not have seen is a question about, are tweets effective to our legislators?
You know, it's a hard question for me to answer because some of our legislators are a little bit, so I don't know if they really look at social media.
Right.
But I think it also helps push public opinion because it get people's attention. There are some younger legislators. That was when you look on, you know, look at them on their record, you know, they're not all older. So surely some of them are going to be watching their Twitter feed or their social media feed. I think that it's a great idea to do storms. You know, that was something I've seen organizations do. And I think a lot of what we're doing is trying to really raise awareness. So it may not hit somebody's inbox exactly, but it may come at them from a different direction when somebody that picks up the phone and calls their legislator and asks them, what is this? You know, why are you doing this?
Yeah, I think if you do tweet, always use the hashtag AL Politics, because reporters pay attention to that one. So it's just hashtag AL Politics. And I think you're right, Kathy, whether the legislator sees it, it is an informational, educational thing. On the open records, there's been a couple of comments. Harriet Huggins had attended a meeting, and those that testified against it said a lot about not having enough staff. And so then the comment was made that money needs to be allocated to help with that.
Well, the bill sets a fee schedule, so they would get reimbursed for providing the records.
Right. I think it's reasonable. Other questions, if you want to unmute and ask, or comments? I'll ask a general
I
one.
think
What do
the
you,
problem,
go ahead, Lynette. Go ahead.
the problem is not that you get reimbursed for just the fees, because that's really the cost of copying it, but it's the hours it's going to take a staff if you are asking for records from this time period to this time period, and you're from one of the smaller counties with a limited staff. So the fee schedule is, does it, and I mean, that doesn't help you hire somebody else if you're being overwhelmed with requests.
Well, it's supposed to cover the labor, but also there's an independent sort of adjudicator that if the request is an undue burden on a particular organization, they have a go back, an independent person that they can talk to and explain why it's an undue burden and get relief. And that person is a state employee, not a person out of the requesting organization.
So it's relief, not from the request, but maybe to expand the time period acceptable to get the request back to the requestor. Because the example I saw in the media was some organization out of Illinois who was asking for some very, very detailed data over a certain period of time. It was for a national product, and the county commission thought it was an onerous burden on their staff to respond to this group out of state. Now, not that they didn't have a valid reason, but I mean, we have to have some understanding about some of the staffs. And if this is during a hot period for them anyway, such as an election season, and people are asking for open records about a lot of things, there's probably a room for compromise here somewhere. If
They're
all
adding,
parties are willing
they're
to do
adding
that.
amendments. Yeah, they're adding amendments to the bill as we speak. The problem has been that the people that opposed it when Cam Ward presented it wouldn't present their, he invited amendments and they wouldn't respond to him. They just wanted to kill it.
And that's why we got to start, talking about holding people accountable. I think also these lobbyists, to try to get them to come to the table and tell us exactly why they don't like it. Besides just a blanket, they come up with, during the testimony, someone mentioned about litter. Somebody might ask for my email about, somebody was wanting litter picked up. And to me, that's a frivolous excuse. I mean, it wasn't, all it was something to throw a comment out that would really, and it ended up that some of the politicians in the room picked up on that and said, oh no, emails. So it's just, you've got to get past this rhetoric that is really more emotional than it is fact-based. And they need to bring in like the concerns, like you mentioned, Leonette, we need to get some actual, this is my concern and let's try to fix it.
It kind of seems like it's a chicken and egg kind of problem too. Like, it seems like there's I would imagine a lot of governments, especially small rural local governments that don't have a lot of resources, are not necessarily keeping their records in the most organized fashion. They may not even have switched over to all digital at this point. And, this is kind of a motivator. Until they have to, they may not go there. So it's sort of like, do we have the law first and then they have to comply, or do they say we can't do it because we're still doing these kind of archaic practices? And so it just seems I agree that we need to work with them where we can, but we also kind of have to push them a little too, I think.
Well, and that's like the pollution
We're
control.
dead last. We have the worst open records law in the whole country. If Louisiana can make it work better and Mississippi can make it work better, they're just as poor as our state is. We could do it too. Yeah,
I think they're just trying to resist. And that's where we've got to somehow push them. We've got to push the people who are opposing it to tell us what's their issue and let us try to resolve it. Otherwise, like Cindy, like you said, it's like at some point you have to demand it and then find out where the problems are. If some agency only has one or two people, then maybe they've got a problem that needs to be fixed in a different way. Because I understand there are some agencies that have only got one or two people.
I'm curious, I was struck by, I was struck by one of your comments about it being a long game, and the fact that we have the time period when the legislature is in session, and then we have the many months when they're not, to work on developing relationships. And so I think a strategy for educating our members about doing that is important. Are there other lessons that y'all feel like you've learned in this first year of the team that you'd like to share with the group?
One thing that I'd like to mention is that we found out that when we request a meeting as the League of Women Voters with various officials, that often they're very receptive to it. I mean, before John Merrill double-crossed us, he met with us. And we had a good meeting with Cam Ward. Even though he'd gone to Pardons and Paroles, he was willing to give us his insights. We had a good meeting with Walt Maddox on how to reach across the aisle, how to position ourselves as the bipartisan or nonpartisan organization that we really are, because you're never going to get anywhere in this state by only working with the Democratic Party. So that was very interesting to me, to find out how receptive a lot of these state officials really are to even talking to a local league.
Yeah, and add to that, I called over to Arthur Orr's office and asking about the Open Records Act, and told him that we wanted a public hearing. We would like to call for one, and he went off and did it within the very next week. And I thought that it may have been a coincidence, but I got the impression that the fact that we called and actually asked for one made a difference.
So on the main bills that we're supporting, HB 129 has passed out of committee. Am I correct about that?
I think it's passed, yeah, but I think they're still looking at possible amendments.
But that's
Gotcha.
that's 165. 165 passed out of committee. Open records.
129 didn't make it yet. I thought it had made it.
No, I think they had a new bill that was
okay.
yeah. So that's the one that we asked the Business Council of Alabama to make some phone calls to help maybe pressure some of the politicians. So that's the thing, is we're learning a lot about, trying to figure out what's the best way to influence what's happening, and not doing it in a way that's adversarial, but just to try to find people who are allies who might be able to help us.
Other questions from the group? I see another comment. Leonette says that Kyle Whitmire singled out League of Women Voters of Alabama as open records bill supporters in his Twitter feed. So that was good, because he's got lots of followers.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're looking at as a measure of our effectiveness, is our ability to be recognized as a agent of change, and someone that is not, that we're not just out there. So so that was a really good thing.
Great. It would be great if I know we have callers in from all over the state tonight, but if you're in the Birmingham League and you have an interest in joining the advocacy team, please let Leonette know, because again, this is a year-round effort. It feels like when we're in the session that we're like mice on a treadmill, but there is a 12-month effort for all of this. So if you're interested in being on this team, please let us know. Okay. I don't see any other comments in the chat. Have I missed anyone's comment? I've tried to pay attention. Okay. And again, if you have questions that you want to unmute, that's fine. So Robin, you mentioned postcards. How would a local league get hold of postcards?
We can ship them.
Okay. Okay.
And that's what we did last year. I shipped a bunch to Mobile. I shipped a bunch to Tuscaloosa. And some of the smaller requests actually just fit into a regular letter size envelope.
Okay. Okay. I do think the point about if our representatives hear from 8 to 10 people, they're going to sit up and take notice. They are. Some will talk with you on the phone, some won't.
Yeah.
Some answer emails. One trick I learned is that not, all the senators have clerical support. So writing them at their alsenate.gov email address is often very effective. For the House members, you often have to find out their other email address, and some of them post it on the website. So I had one, my representative told me 2 years ago that he doesn't really ever look at his alhouse.gov email address. And he gave me a different one, which I've used subsequently, but he's also got it posted. That same, if you go on the website, you click on a member and it'll show their contact information. But then if you click on the tab that says district, often there's a very different email address there. So I've learned to start looking at that.
I know that.
Yeah. Because they don't, one clerical person might support 5 to 8 members of the House. And so it is hard for them to stay on top of their email. Okay.
Well, I just like to say that I've really enjoyed this. And I
Yeah.
especially enjoy the discussion and the questions.
Yeah. We really appreciate you coming. And we're almost at the end of the hour. So I want to make sure before we sign off that there aren't any more burning questions from anybody or comments, if lessons you've learned, perhaps. Okay. Well, if not, there's no reason not to end the meeting early. Thank you both so very much, Kathy and Robin. This has been really helpful. Leonette, did you have any other comments that you wanted to make before we close?
No, just do your part for defending democracy and follow up on some of these great ideas here tonight. Thank y'all.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you. This was very
Night.
enjoyable. Thank you.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Kathy and Robin. Wonderful.